My next guest is a professional I have wanted to meet for coffee for some time. He is founding partner of Richardson's Strategy Group. He is a policy analyst and a political strategist. You may know him as someone who has successfully supported current Mayor Ken Sim in his campaign to become mayor. Our conversation involves not only what he would like to see for the city and why, but more about himself and who he is. This was a really exciting episode for me. I learned a lot. I learned from this guest's communication skills, and it was a thrill speaking with him. I know you will enjoy the next episode with Kareem Allan. Coming up next on Rachel Thexton Connects. Okay, so today on the podcast, I'm really excited to welcome my next guest. I've wanted to have him on the show for a while. Between the time I invited him and today when we record, he made a pretty significant announcement. So first of all, let me start by welcoming Kareem Allan, founding partner, Richardson Strategy Group, political strategist, and policy analyst. I was joking with Kareem earlier that his title and the work he does, that's just a little bit of it. But welcome to the podcast, Kareem. It's great to have you here.
Thank you so much. Always been a big fan of the show and really honored to be here.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It's really great to speak with you. You know, I've been watching through the media, via media mostly, your work as a communicator myself. I'm very interested in how you have run campaigns, how you have managed various challenges that you've been faced with, even how, conduct yourself in interviews is of interest to me as a communicator. But, let's get to, I think, what I think most people are going to want to know off the bat, and then dig into the stuff that interests me even more, actually. But you have announced that you're going to be running for the mayor of Vancouver.
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask you when and how this decision came about, and why do you want to take on this role as leader of Vancouver?
Yeah, I want to take on the role because I just think that Vancouverites want a mayor, want a person who walks into City Hall every day and asks themselves one question: how can I make the city better? I think for the last few years, there have been a lot of distractions away from the things that matter the most to people in the city. We've seen runaway tax increases, 26% tax increases, more than any other council in the history of the city of Vancouver, but the services haven't gone up. Garbage pickup hasn't gotten better. Community center and library hours are shrinking. So where's all the money going? But beyond that, there are still public safety issues and concerns. And we're seeing the watering down of our democratic institutions in the last 2.5 years, getting rid of the democratically elected park board without a referendum or input from people in the city, getting rid of the integrity commissioner while you're under investigation from the integrity commissioner. So a lot of these things really have been eating away at me, and I've always felt that I could do a better job. In the last, probably month or two, I've been getting a lot more encouragement to take it on. It's not usual for someone who runs campaigns to go and put themselves forward, but
No.
yeah, I thought, if someone better does come along, I will support them. If some of the people who have really, really worked hard at maintaining a good public profile and really have a good grasp of the issues, if one of those people steps forward, I will support them. But at this point, until they do, I'm happy to go out and challenge and debate the issues in front of us.
Kareem, that actually brings an interesting point. I hope you don't mind me asking you this, but you referenced that those who run political campaigns don't usually put themselves forward. I wonder why, because, you'd think that would be the exact person who would be actually quite well prepared to do so.
Yeah, like historically, some of our more effective politicians here in Vancouver and BC and in Canada have come from being people who organize political campaigns. So I think of Gordon Campbell and Mike Harcourt, but Lester Pearson and Mark Carney are two other examples. Just, I'm not at that level, trust me, but those are people who have a bit of a better understanding of what happens behind the scenes, and that experience that you do get working as a civil servant, working on running campaigns, I think does help color your perspective and help you give you a better sense of the levers of power available to you. Typically, when people come outside of politics, their approach tends to be a sledgehammer to every issue. And sometimes you need a screwdriver or a ratchet or a wrench. And it takes a lot of time to really understand what those tools are that are available to you and when's the appropriate time to use what tool. So yeah, it's not typical. For me, a big part of my career has always been in public service. I've served as a civil servant. I've run campaigns. I've worked as a political staffer. I was a policy director at the Board of Trade. To me, this is just a different kind of public service. To answer your question more plainly, I think the reason why people in the back rooms or organizers or bureaucrats don't run for office is because they know the personal exacting toll it can take on your personal life.
Yes.
And it's not very appealing. And especially in today's era of Twitter and Elon Musk's Twitter, both sides, left and right, have been pretty rough on their politicians.
Yes, that's a good point. Whenever I've had a municipal leader on, I've asked them that question. I'm going to ask you that in a few minutes here, but it's taxing. I can see, even doing communications in the space is quite taxing. You recently interviewed with Mike Howell of Business in Vancouver, and when you were asked about why you wanted to run for mayor, I was keen to see what you'd answer. And, I often get frustrated with these kind of canned answers. And I'm sure that you're, familiar in communications, as sometimes those answers have to be a little bit more brief and kind of they bridge back, what term we use in communication, they bridge back to our key messages, so to speak. But you said simply, and I quote, "I want to run for mayor because I think I can do a better job. And I want to run for mayor because I love this city and I'm not happy with its direction." And I thought that was an honest, clear, authentic answer. It was blunt, but it was, your truth. And I think from what I'm hearing, that many are finding in the city of Vancouver, they're not happy with the way things are going. So I wanted to ask you, related to that question, answering questions with media, especially around things such as running for mayor and being in a political role, in a municipal leadership role. What is your primary advice for those working in the political space when speaking with media? I've always found, for example, Minister Callan to be fantastic. He's very engaging, always there to talk, always open, very honest. What's your advice? You seem to go kind of along the same lines as Minister Callan.
Yeah, I think as our media has become more diffuse, it used to be one or two TV stations and three or four radio stations, and that's where people got all their news. And now, with all the layering of social media, it's been more important to speak, I think, clearly, concisely, and authentically. I think the authenticity piece is often underestimated, and we spend a lot of time with our clients, and as you do too, to really sort of work through the essence of what it is that is your client's values. And you want to sort of lead out with the things that you believe in. I think this younger generation of voters and younger generation of consumers, they can spot a phony from a mile away. And I don't think over packaging, over messaging is particularly good and helpful. But the other thing too is that it's really easy for us when we're working with really complex subject matter to really dig into the weeds and try to show how smart you are by using really big fancy words and quoting lines from peer-reviewed research. Just plainly tell people, when you're in a position of leadership, what you think the right direction is and how you plan on getting there. And if you could just be that concise, if you can take a complex issue, boil it down to its essential points and how you see it, I think it gives the voter a bit of confidence. Okay, this person's obviously understood the issue. He's got a plan. You either like the plan or you don't, but at least you've given that person the choice to bring them along into the conversation rather than speaking at them and citing facts at them. I think that's important.
That's great advice. And I agree. The authenticity piece is, I think, a huge part. I think it is lacking not only in the political space, but in a lot of areas in our society as of late. And it's one of the missions for the podcast. So you and I both work in communications, as we've spoken to, very different ways. Some probably cross over, but you quite extensive political experience. So we work in communications, yet, in different ways. And your experience is, much of it is related to politics and policy, leading successful campaigns. And I just wanted to get an idea. You do media relations, you've led political campaigns. There's just a variety of things under your bio. And I thought our listeners would just benefit, and as would I, if you could just speak a bit to your work with Richard's Strategy Group and what are the various elements of your work in that role.
Yeah, I think a lot of the work that I've done has really been project-based. A lot of the work that PR firms do here in Vancouver, it tends to be a little bit less corporate. A lot of the A lot of that work's done out of Toronto and Montreal. So for us, it tends to be a little bit more project based because we're not a corporate center. And so when you take a look at the arc of whether they're large capital projects that are such as hospitals or energy projects like dams or transmission lines for electricity, there's a bunch of essential elements. One is just to understand the regulatory process and how the approvals for the project go, and understanding how to build confidence with government around those issues. But then also there's the community aspect, and that's really where we shine, and that's working to understand what are the concerns, what are the priorities of local communities. Included in that are First Nations as well. So they're involved on the government side, but they're also involved on the community side as well too. And the essential component for getting projects through from a public affairs perspective is to build trust. Trust is essential, but you can't build that trust without research. So for me, everything starts with good research. And there's 2 or 3 things that are critical to the research. One, obviously, is the more traditional research that you'll see in media relations, which is doing the polling and the focus groups to understand where people's anxieties are, to be able to lead those conversations in the community. Okay, are you concerned about X, Y, Z? All right, what are good strategies do you think to work through those issues? The other part of the research is to actually just go into community, boots on the ground, engage, listen, hear, go to those coffee shops, go to those diners, and hear directly from people. And the last part, obviously, is the more academic part of the research, just to really understand the complexities of the engineering and of some of these projects, and making sure that you're able to distill some of the more complex aspects of the more technical parts and relate them down to people who might not be that technical. So that, in essence, is really the work that we've been doing. It's been really rewarding. I've had the opportunity to travel all over the province. I've been to probably 100 of the 203 First Nations communities in BC over the course of my career. And so it gives you a really neat perspective on British Columbia and this place. And, you know, as I'm going through this journey in Vancouver, understanding how Vancouver is such an important connection point to all these communities as well, too. So having that perspective, having that experience, seeing leaders in communities wrestling with their issues, I think has also been helpful and instructive in how I approach things as well, too.
I've always found it interesting because part of political communications is clearly, and as you've been speaking to, listening and hearing. And I find when I'm working with clients, especially not so much lately, I'm working with a different kind of sector of clients, but historically, when I've worked with corporate clients, I've recommended often that they do more listening as a part of their communication strategy, as a part of the engagement versus just broadcasting messaging constantly via media relations and pitching. And I tend to get quite a bit of pushback on that. The listening part is not something that they are keen on. And I'm wondering, have you had this experience from clients, and have you had similar feedback? Because that seems like a no-brainer. This is low-hanging fruit where we can really understand the consumer, the community, the group, and whichever stakeholders we're trying to connect with.
Yeah, I've done community town halls where people will come up, and typically when you do these town halls, you know, you'll hear a lot of the same concerns repeated over and over and over again. And then if you're able to get your project, get your client, get the people that you're working with to really just accept that there's this feeling, there's this energy around this issue, and people are communicating about it, and then you incorporate their words into your communication strategy, people then feel genuinely heard. When you go into community and listen and actually act on what they've asked, the ability to build that trust is so incredible, and the good things that come out of that are pretty evident. But yeah, I've noticed that there's sometimes a reluctance to concede. There's a reluctance to compromise. But ultimately, really there are very, very few paths forward in this complex regulatory environment that we're in for energy projects, for hospital construction, for whatever it is. That ignoring community and ignoring the voices of community is getting harder, particularly now with Reddit and Twitter and everything else. You can't silence those voices in the way that you might have been able to 30, 40 years ago.
Yeah.
And so I do think it's essential to incorporate that listening into your decision making, but then also incorporate it into your communications plan.
Yeah. I'm going to ask you one more political questions and then
Sure.
then we're going to change gears. I'm sure you're going to be faced with only political questions for the foreseeable future. And this isn't as you answer this question, please know that if the answers you don't have, it doesn't mean that they're not important to you. I'm putting you on the spot here.
All right.
If you could list your top 3 priority areas that you want to accomplish as mayor of Vancouver, and I'm putting you on the spot, should you be elected, what would those be?
The first thing, obviously, I think is just the city's finances are in disarray. We're looking at a fiscal cliff. We have this thing, Conference Board of Canada recently reported the dependency ratio. And the dependency ratio for public policy analysts looks at the number of people in the economy that are paying taxes versus the number of people in the economy that are not. So they're mostly seniors and students who haven't entered the job force yet. That number in Canada is declining very quickly, but it's declining even faster in Vancouver. Why is this important? Well, it's important because if we don't have young people setting up roots and investing their careers and committing to paying taxes their whole lives in the city of Vancouver, when I retire 10, 15 years from now, all those social programs, all those services that we've grown to come and love in this country, there's not going to be anyone to pay for it. So in practical terms, what does that mean? The average age of a Vancouver resident is about 50 years old.
The average age is 50.
Yeah, it's 50 years old. And in most cities in North America, it's about 35, 40. In most African cities, it's about 17, 18 years old. So we're a very old city. So this is existential. If we can't attract young people to lay down roots in Vancouver, we're not going to have anyone to pay for the social programs that me and you are going to need in the future. And that's always been the social contract in Canada, is we take care of our young people, and then when we get older, our young people take care of us. The 2 biggest barriers for young people is that we aren't a corporate center. We haven't done a great job attracting big companies and big investments to create a job and labor market that pays high wages. But the second part is the housing piece.
Right.
So in terms of the housing piece, we've really set ourselves up for failure as a city. It takes about 6 to 8 years to get a high-rise approved in the city of Vancouver. It's just too long. It took the Americans 9 years to get a spaceship to the moon, but it takes 8 years to get a building built in Vancouver. So it's taking too long. And then the holding cost on owning that land and having to wait 8 years for approvals just layers on cost and cost and cost to the ultimate home buyer, to that ultimate renter. So we really need to flood the zone with a ton of new housing, and the approach that we've taken has not been good. In some cases, we've also been tearing down our best rental stock to put up new condos. We need to protect some of those assets as well too. But generally speaking, the number one issue for me is the longevity of our economy, the fiscal cliff that we're facing, and how it's so rooted down into students. Second issue, obviously, is going to be public safety. I'm really concerned about that. And the third, I've already touched on, is just the democratic institutions. Our integrity commissioner, our park board have been challenged. I think those things that give transparency to the public are extremely essential. We fought hard for democracy. We fought hard for transparency, like FOI rules and integrity commissioners. To walk back from that in this day and age, I don't think is helpful. But broadly speaking, I just think that there needs to be this lens on every policy decision made. If it doesn't help students, if it doesn't help seniors, if it doesn't help working people and their families, the city just should not be doing it. And if there are things that aren't helping those 3 groups of people, then the city needs to get out of it. So it's just having a clear vision and supported by some strong principles, and being very clear in how you're going to make decisions to the public to create some stability and some certainty in the policy setting agenda.
Okay. Well, that sounds quite sound to me. Okay. Vote yes. No, I will. I told you when I spoke with you, I am thrilled that you're running, but you're going to have lots of questions. I have many political questions for you, but I'm not going to do it on this podcast.
I can come back for a second show anytime you want.
Let's do that. Thank you so much. Let's do that. So I want to kind of learn a little bit more about you, Kareem, as a person, and I want to know kind of how you grew up, where you grew up, and what life was like for you as a young person.
Yeah, my mom's family immigrated to Canada in 1970. They left Sudan after escaping a communist revolution there. They spent 2 years in a refugee camp in Lebanon before their papers cleared to come to Canada. When my mom graduated from SFU in the mid-70s, she went back, met my dad, and got married. And they decided that they wanted to raise their children here in Canada. So my mom moved back at that point, and I was born here in the city of Vancouver, which is becoming, you run into a lot of people that live here that actually aren't born here. So that's unique to my story. I did grow up in Richmond, and When I was wrapping up university, I moved back to Vancouver. So I've been back in the city now for about 25 years. I spent a bit of time working on Parliament Hill. I spent a little bit of time working as a civil servant and doing some of the doing some of these campaigns. Had a bit of time at the Board of Trade. I studied and graduated from Simon Fraser University and did my graduate studies at Gonzaga. Did a semester, 2 semesters in Italy, which was really awesome.
Okay.
But yeah, that's basically, the arc of my story. The most poignant sort of things that, I remember in terms of, experiences that relate to how I might want to move forward with the city. My dad, when he immigrated here, his English was really terrible. It's actually quite bad, and because of that language barrier, he really had a hard time getting a job. And so, like most immigrants, he became an entrepreneur. He was a home builder, and he built about 5 or 6 or 7 homes a year, and was able to earn a very, very modest but healthy income doing that. In the 80s, when the recession hit and we were at 25% interest rates, that really beat us up a lot as a family. And, I didn't really learn until a lot later in my life that we were pretty poor in that time period. And the reason why I didn't know is because we had all these, even though we were living in Richmond, we had all access to all these amazing services. I would be going to the Vancouver Public Library. I would be going out and swimming in Kit's Pool, and I'd have these wonderful memories of, clamming at Jericho Beach and just doing all these things. And there was this richness of life that the city offers to everyone. And right now, I feel that it's under threat. We haven't been reinvesting in our parks and our community centers and our libraries, and that richness of life that the city offers. It deserves to be supported.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. When we're talking about public services, the library, which our family enjoys very much, our parks, which are, when visitors come to Vancouver, they just can't believe, especially Americans, they can't believe the parks we have and how, the shape of them, the fact that they're open at nighttime and they can access them, the value of this. But I never thought of the great value this would bring to newcomers and to those who really don't have the financial means to participate in activity that costs, which is a great deal of families in Vancouver. So there's massive value to those public services and those public amenities that we sometimes just think of as a pool or a park. It's not so simple.
It's not so simple, and the barriers to accessing these services is going up, not down. And I want to do what I can. If we can get our financial house in order, we can start to remove those barriers. And maybe there's free music classes at the community center, or maybe there's expanded library hours. We know that public safety is an issue in the city of Vancouver, and we know that there's been this massive run up in the VPD budget, and it really hasn't made anyone feel safer. These are some of the things. The focus has been really very short-term thinking. We know by looking at inner cities in the United States, when they invest in parks, when they invest in libraries, when they invest in community centers, it does have a longer term positive impact on public safety and crime. When kids that are vulnerable to participating in crime have another option put in front of them, when they have activities that enrich their lives and broaden their perspectives and horizons, that does have a better impact on those things. So we can't disconnect how important some of these social services that the city provides are into the long-term health of our downtown cores and other areas that are being impacted by public safety issues.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a lot more complex. Malcolm Gladwell has some great thoughts on those types of issues. Yeah. I read on one of your Instagram, I went through your Instagram quite carefully before our episode, and you had some really neat posts on there. And one of them that I saw, it caught my eye. And on that post, it talks about how your career was inherited. And you also have an amazing post on your Instagram describing the leadership and wisdom of your grandfather. I believe his name was Abbas Allam. Can you tell us more about the role that your family played in your career path, how that inspired you?
Yeah, I've been pretty fortunate to have 2 incredibly great grandfathers. My dad passed away about 3.5, 4 years ago, and I was going out and cleaning up his apartment with my cousin in Cairo, and we stumbled onto all these old family artifacts. My grandfather on my dad's side was a teacher, and he impressed on his kids the importance of education, and he was really successful in raising his kids. One of his daughters, my aunt, was one of the first women in Egypt to graduate with a law degree. My other aunt was the first female deputy deputy minister in the country. She was the deputy minister of housing. And then the other two men in the family were both generals in the army, including my father. And then my other uncle was the executive of the public broadcaster in Egypt, so kind of like their CBC.
Wow.
So the education was really important to him. He impressed that on his kids. My grandfather in the 1920s, Egypt was pretty agrarian at that time, and but the world was changing very, very fast, and he impressed on the family the importance of education. On my mom's side, my grandfather was a businessman. He was expropriated in the Communist Revolution and chased out of the country.
Mm-hmm.
He came to Canada and really started an incredible life here, did incredibly wonderful things, got involved a little bit in politics. Just proximity. The neighborhood I grew up in Richmond, later on in my childhood, one of our neighbors was a provincial cabinet minister. Another neighbor was a federal cabinet minister. I met Brian Mulroney when I was like 5 years old, and that stuck with me. But the neighbor on the other side was Art Kuby, who led the Solidarity Strike in 1982. So I had a rich experience of both left and right politics right there in my cul-de-sac in Richmond.
Wow.
So pretty neat to have been surrounded by the people I've had. And I've been lucky also just in my career too, to just have worked with some of the best minds in politics and best minds in government. I just feel that I have the opportunity to honor the legacies of some of these people by putting my name forward.
Very cool. So you really have a lot of leaders that have come before you that have inspired your work and to take the leap that you're taking now, which is, well, it's not a leap, but to take the step you're taking now is to run for mayor.
Yeah, public service was just really always important for my family, and I come from a family of public servants, and I've served very differently here in Canada than they did,
Yeah.
but the principles and the passion for it is the same.
You speak about your grandfather on Instagram. How do you think he would feel if he knew you were running for mayor of Vancouver?
He'd be very upset. He knows exactly what this life entails and the pressure that it puts on people, and how unforgiving the public can be.
Yeah.
But secretly, I think he'd never tell me he was proud of me, but he'd probably get
Proud but concerned.
proud but concerned for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Can we discuss the media for a few minutes? I like these podcast discussions because they allow for kind of a deeper dialogue. There are some great feature writers in our city, but fewer than there have ever been. And I think that's incredibly unfortunate for society. I often will pitch a feature to one of the feature writers, and the response will be, "What a great story. I can't write it. I just don't have the time." And I think that does a great disservice to, society, and the fact that story will then need to be told in another way. And I mean, that's one tiny bit of benefit that this podcast I hope will make, is to tell some of those stories. But journalism is important, and I take great value in journalism. I value it. I think it's just absolutely vital for keeping the wheels turning and people held to accountability. Due to all these cutbacks, we're seeing, there was even an announcement last week regarding radio cutbacks, CKNW radio and so forth. Kareem, do you think that we can rescue journalism, or is it too late? And do you see value in finding ways to do so?
First of all, I agree with you wholeheartedly. Journalism, media is essential pillar in our democracy. In days gone by, media, the Walter Cronkites, the Peter Mansbridges of the world were ultimately the referees of our election system. Yes, you have elections BC and elections Canada, but in terms of fairly and equitably framing an issue to help voters make their decisions, media has played a really, really important role in that. And as its resources have shrunk, misinformation has become a bigger staple in our democracy.
Yeah.
And that's not healthy.
Yeah.
I don't want to get too philosophical, but we eradicated measles in this country, a couple decades ago or a decade ago. And now to see measles back on the rise again on the backs of misinformation is just so disheartening.
Yeah.
Just disheartening for me. So the value of journalism is essential. So I agree with you on that. Can it be rescued? I think that some publications have done a really, really good job adjusting and adapting. I think others haven't. I think that one of the things that the areas I think that have really suffered the most have really been print. print, they've really relied historically on subscribers, and the barrier to advertise in print was always high. Like, full page ad in the Sun used to cost $24,000. So the model just didn't make sense when you can reach just as many people for $45 on Facebook now. So there needs to be a rethink a little bit in just how the information is pulled together. I think that we're going to need to see, bigger conglomerates. So tying in podcasts, print, TV, radio, all into sort of one site that has broad social media distribution outlets. That seems to be areas where New York Times has succeeded, where the Washington Post has succeeded. I think the Globe and Mail has done a good job in adapting. I know we all get frustrated when our subscription lapses with the Globe and Mail and then we hit the paywall. But it's a good reminder to people,
yes,
that it's important. I do think that there is a conversation that inevitably has to happen, and that is, should taxpayers subsidize journalists?
Mm-hmm.
And I see the pitfalls of doing it and not doing it, but I think in the absence of a real clear path, I think it's something that we probably need to start considering more seriously, just as we're seeing the consequences of misinformation play out on U.S. politics.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, what you bring up about the measles and what we saw through COVID, the devastation of the visuals of running out of space for those who had passed in New York City. And, I would never judge, families who have lost loved ones and hadn't been vaccinated, but there's just so much misinformation that's being circulated. And I even fall prey to it. I was saying to my husband last night, I was seeing images on Facebook and I said, I don't think these are real. It was a celebrity. And I said, I think this is AI because this wouldn't be happening. And it's just so easy, even now visually, to present misinformation via AI that, we're going to run into a space where, we're going to have people, just really not knowing the truth about what are the facts from which sources. And, I think what you say is interesting about subsidizing journalism. What are your thoughts on having someone in a role for even a temporary amount of time in government whose responsibility is to kind of resurrect news and really just put their, goals on making sure that information from solid sources and media, and we have kind of a, stream of information that keeps people from this dangerous misinformation. Kind of interesting. The journalism minister.
Maybe it's not a journalism minister, maybe it's just a national commission to really try to come up with some really, really good ideas. I think in the absence of that, I think the role of the CBC has become even more important, particularly when, as private sector media has vacated space, the role of a public broadcaster has become more important. Like, if there's a forest fire and we just lost, Vernon's radio station, CBC becomes a lot more important than when you're talking about evacuation orders. So I think the role of CBC is become more important, but I think there needs to be competition in media as well too. I don't think that having one set of one editorial board framing the debate I don't see that as being healthy either. But I do think that, pulling the best and the brightest in the country around a commission to come up with some suggestions. We are starting to see Google now starting to cut checks because of the legislation that was brought in under Trudeau. Aspects of that legislation, I think, have been very effective and positive. Other aspects have been quite not good. Mm-hmm. So I think it warrants a lot more thought, and it probably warrants some form of leadership at the federal government level.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you for that. You just have me thinking. I studied journalism in university. It was my original career path, and it's incredibly important to me. And now you have me thinking of new ideas. So thank you for that. Ethics in communications. Now, this is one that I talk about in my house quite a bit. Spin doctor is a term that PR communicators have been described as. It's a term that I despise. I feel that a good communicator, a good PR person is not spinning anything. A good, solid communicator should be recommending honest, factual, authentic engagement. And there have been many times in my career when I've been faced, well, not many, but a good number of times when I have been faced with ethical concerns. Should I take this client on? Is it time to say to this client, I'm not comfortable here? Those types of things when you're working in a role. Now in politics, that comes up a lot more often, the ethical questions. But I just wanted to ask you about ethics in communication. So when you're working with clients or considering taking on a new client, What are some of your ethical considerations that come into play with your decision making, and does this happen often for you?
Yeah, when we started Richardson Strategy, we made a very, very deliberate decision that we were going to exclusively work with Indigenous companies, communities, and government. And to be successful in that space, integrity, honesty, ethics are of paramount importance, particularly when the negotiation side in terms of title and rights and the negotiation between First Nations and government. Things can get very, very, very tricky in those discussions very, very quickly. And again, having that honesty and that integrity to provide the right kind of advice is really, really important. There have been a few times in my career where we've passed on a client or not taken it on just because it might not be super values aligned. But I've kind of always been a little bit more on the renegade side of that, is that maybe I can go in there and start to challenge them with some of the questions that I think community would ask. And don't ever underestimate your ability to be influential, being shaping how your clients or how the people you work with ideas or perspective on things. Once you understand the full context and you've got a really good perspective of things, it's pretty easy to start to drive home what the right decision and the wrong decision is or
Right.
isn't.
Yeah.
And I haven't really come across too many times. Maybe earlier in my career is more of a problem, but as I've gotten later into career, I think corporate ethics have dramatically enhanced. There's still a lot of bad actors out there, and there's good people and bad people everywhere. Definitely a lot less the means justify the ends or the ends justify the means approach. Like that was something that I came up against a lot earlier in my career. But now I just generally think that so much has gone into corporate ethics, corporate social responsibility, EDI, environment, health, safety, all these things, and all the ways. One of the benefits of social media is that there are so many ways now to hold companies accountable, and
Yeah.
that there's less opportunities or less things that they can do to escape that accountability. And so the only way through is honesty. So I think that in a way that's been one of the very positive things of social media, is it's added on another layer of accountability onto corporations, onto politicians as well too.
Yeah, I wonder, that's interesting. I wonder if I agree with you that it was more so earlier in my career, but I do find I still run into it. And what you say is interesting, recommending or just reminding me of the change that one can make within an organization's space. I wonder the difference between me being a woman and you being a man. And I mention that not because I don't play the female card very often, but I have noticed, especially in certain sectors of clients, that um, there's still things that are said in boardrooms that I'm shocked to hear when I walk into a room. When I provide advice that I am, very confident is the right piece of advice, can be, I've been spoken to in ways after being in my role for almost 25 years that have surprised me. So do you think that, I think we're a little bit more behind than we may realize in the corporate space. I don't know about the political space when it comes to the female professional and how they may be kind of treated, trusted, viewed, the optics around that. Any thoughts on that, Kareem?
Yeah, I think that all your comments are 100% accurate. But I do think that we still haven't, we don't have equality in the workplace, both on in terms of just influence within organizations in the policy setting sphere, but also pay equity.
Yeah.
There's still a huge amount of discrepancy between men and women. I've faced a different kind of adversity, applying for jobs to be a spokesperson for, a company. Um, you lose out to the blonde, or you lose out to, I don't think we want a guy named whose middle name is Mahmoud Abbas to be to be our spokesperson. So there's
Right.
times where I felt I've lost out to a job or an opportunity because I look a little different.
Right.
I think that's gotten better over the course of my career, but you still walk in and you could still just go through most of the big organizations and companies and look at their list of boards of directors, and it's still very white, it's still very male. And you see that a lot in government too.
Hmm.
Very white, very male dominated. We've seen in politics that the front benches of government, cabinet, we've seen the Liberals under Trudeau, under Eby, under Horgan, gender equity at the cabinet table. But when you start to look behind, who are the senior staff in the Premier's office? Who are the deputy ministers? It gets less diverse very quickly. So we're not there yet. We're not close. We're making progress, and it's not fast enough. The barriers are there, but definitely the opportunities I've had are far exceed the ones that my dad had.
Yes.
But yeah, we're not anywhere close to where we need to be. And those comments that you've experienced, I've certainly been there and heard them myself, and it sucks. It really, really sucks to have to be in that room, and you're just trying to decide, am I going to say something or just shut up and play along? And that's not a great place to be when you're a woman or a person of color, but it happens way too often.
Yeah, it does. No, I appreciate your answering that question. I hadn't planned on asking it, but it kind of came into the discussion. Kareem, what is something about you? I mean, we're going to be reading in the months to come and watching and seeing online a lot about, various, reasons why you're passionate about wanting to run for mayor, your history and running successful campaigns. We're going to hear all the facts. We're going to, Vancouverites will judge and the vote will come. But what's something about you as a person that few people know, something that would surprise most people about you as a person?
I'm a geek. I love Star Wars. I love Superman. If you could kind of see, it's a little blurred out my office, my collection of Star Wars memorabilia that adorns my office. But yeah, there's few outlets when you're constantly on call as a public relations professional. Rachel, I'm sure you experience this. Like, okay, you have an idea of how you're going to be spending your evening. Okay, I'm going to order pizza. I'm going to watch Netflix, and then some catastrophe happens with one of your clients, and next thing you know, you're on call.
Yeah.
So I expect that's going to ramp up, in my times to watch, Andor or any of my favorite Star Wars show on Disney Plus are going to diminish. For me, the things that I enjoy the most, to try to sort of down tools is enjoying our parks. Civic Spirit Park, even though it's not run by the city of Vancouver, it's my favorite part of the city. Got a really cute dog. His name's Oliver. He was voted the fourth cutest dog by BuzzFeed back in the day.
Really?
So, yeah, he's very cute. I'll send you a picture of Oliver.
Please do.
But yeah, me and my wife like to spend a little bit of time on the seawall with him. But yeah, I haven't had a ton of my own personal time in the last little while. The time I have had to myself, I've tried to go back to Egypt and spend some time with my family, and that's really sort of been the place where I could really go and unplug, because it's almost 11-hour time zone difference. So people are less apt to try to get a hold of me while I'm there, and family's pretty protective of me over there too. So I do get some downtime when I go.
Okay. So I have to make sure to remember that. Star Wars.
Star Wars,
Star Wars, and Batman, didn't you say?
Superman. But
Oh,
Batman's on the list. He's on. I am an admirer of Batman comic books, and there's a new Superman movie coming out, so I will be watching that too with
it's so funny
bated breath.
because as you describe, as I just mixed that up, my husband is going to just, because I always mix up the characters, the superheroes all the time. And he's like, okay, the Spider-Man wears the suit with the spider stuff on it. And it's very simple. And I still mix it up. So it's kind of funny that I did that. But anyway, I will remember now that we've talked about it. Kareem, I ask all guests, and I'm really interested to hear from you about a couple of top nonprofits that you're passionate about that you'd like to share. Just like to build awareness for new ones.
Yeah, I just came off the board at the Vancouver Overdose Prevention Society. It's the largest supervised consumption site in North America, but OPS also is one of the largest referrers of people to recovery in the country as well too. They have a recovery navigator program that's been now duplicated, helping people that want to end their addictions or move away from them. It's been a really, really rewarding time to be on that board. But in addition to it too, there's an aspect to OPS that is very community based, running AA and NA programs. Food distribution. I think OPS does about 6,000 meals a month as well. So it's a really great organization. It's a wonderful part of our city, and really just shows the incredible resilience of Vancouverites, and how kind everyone can be to one another. It's been really awesome to be there.
Yeah, OPS is fantastic. And I thank you for mentioning the various elements of the Overdose Prevention Society. I think many think of it as simply going in and having access to space for safe supply, which is very important. But there are many more elements to what they do to support the community, as you've described. So thank you. I'll make sure to link to OPS in this episode. Well, this has been interesting, Kareem. And I, as I mentioned to you, I would like to have you on again. I hope that you don't get too busy and important for the podcast. But I'd love to have you on again at some point and chat. It's been really good to get to know you a little bit. And I wish you the best in the days and months to come. I know they will be stress-filled, but I have a feeling that you're an authentic person, and that you would lead the city in the right direction. So I wish you all the best in your run for mayor.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed my time, and I will definitely be back. I'll be very, very responsive. I enjoyed my time here today, and looking forward to the next one.
Thank you so much, Kareem. Appreciate it.
Thanks a lot. Be kind and truly connect. You are listening to Rachel Thexton Connects.